One of the most mysterious and gifted creatures in the world of myth is currently on display in the Queen's Zoo, less than 5 miles away from this room. And I'm speaking about the lynx, known now, at least in the British Commonwealth, primarily as the inspiration behind a range of men's antiperspirant. The feline species was depicted by the ancients as bequeathed with the ability to see through solid objects and deep into the distance. The very name lynx derives from the Greek word glix, meaning light or brightness, which is in turn the root of the name Luke. And in every single medieval bestiary or catalogue of creatures and their characteristics, lynxes were listed as gifted with inimitable vision. And for many, this gift extended beyond the ability to see more deeply in space, but also comprised the capacity to see more keenly in time, including a talent for divining parapsychological truths and keeping metaphysical secrets. In fact, in 1603, in an age in which the church suppressed the work of scientists, Federico Sessi, an Italian biologist, founded the now renowned Accademia dei Lynxes, the Academy of the Lynxes, linking the clear-sighted empirical study of nature with the penetrating glare and truth-seeking gaze of the lynx. And the motto of that academy, which despite some decades of interruption survives to this day, was minima cura si maxima vi, inspect small things for the greatest effects. And beyond biology, in 1687, a Polish astronomer made use of this myth when naming one of the most faint constellations, the lynx, suggesting that only one in possession of the creature's sensitive vision could even see it. But for our purposes, the part of the lynx myths that is most pertinent is not its exceptional sense of sight, for there is one more myth tied to the lynx by lapidarists and gemologists from ancient Greece through the 17th century, starting with one of Aristotle's prize students, Theophrastus, and ending in 1567 with the scholar John Maplet. Zoologists and symbologists and biologists all wrote of a fabled gemstone called the lingurium, a jewel with magnetic and therapeutic properties formed from the solidified urine of lynxes. And the reason that this is at all relevant for us is that for centuries it was thought that lingurium was one of the gems on the breastplate of the high priest. In describing each of the 4 rows of the Choshen, Moshe lists the precious stones in order, the third row being Hatur Ashlishi, Leshem, Shavo, V'ach Lama. And while the Septuagint translates Shavo as agate and Achlama as amethyst, it renders Leshem as lincurion, which the Targum itself calls Kane Runun, in an apparent agreement. While the Septuagint and the Targum do seem to identify the Leshem with the lynx, the overwhelming majority of commentaries and authorities now see it not as a mythical jewel or mystical gem, but actually as a rather common, even dull-looking rock called jacinth. And this is my question. Why, when the high priest's breastplate contains an opal, a topaz, a sapphire, a jasper, an emerald, and a ruby, would it also have a common jacinth? I'd understand adding a mythical gem, but why would Hashem insist on the high priest wearing a common rock amid rows of precious crystals? It seems almost as preposterous as finding a piece of gravel embossed on Queen Elizabeth's imperial crown amidst its 2,901 precious jewels. What role could a common rock possibly play on the high priest's breastplate? And there are 2 answers to this question that I'd like to share with you today, which have radically different conceptions, not only of the role of the stone, but the role of the high priest and each of us as well. First, we turn to the Turkish-born Mahram al-Sheikh, a 16th century fundraiser, commentator, judge, and jurist for whom the common material quality of the Leshem could not be less pertinent to its purpose as it sits on the heart of the high priest, because for him, It is less the geological traits of these gems than their names that is the key. For him, the Shavot may be agate, but more importantly, the name means lishvot, to be patient. And the Tarshish may be Tobaz, but more centrally, the name means lihitroshesh, to be austere. And each and every mineral matters less for its sparkle and more for its lesson, where its name serves as a platform to crystallize the character of the Kohen Gadol. And the Leshem for the Alshech, despite its relatively common mineral properties, glistens with a powerful message that shines as brightly as every other gem. For him, the Leshem signals to the high priest that Leshem Yitbarachu, v'lo la'adam, he ought to direct himself to God and not to humanity. For the Alshech, a mystic and homilist, the Leshem is precious not for its mythic origin or geological scarcity, but for its name's claim that the high priest ought to concentrate his attention on heaven. For the Alshech, the Kohen Gadol, girded in gold and silk and linen, carries gems on his heart to sway him to hearken to heaven and detach himself from the habits of humankind. The temple for him is a silent, pure, Edenic and enduring space, offering refuge from the taints that haunt the human condition. And seeing the Leshem reminds the head of the ritual branch of Jewish government that, unlike the king or the court, his focus ought to be solely on God, Leshem, and not La'adam, on the here and now. But there is another view found in the philosophy of a medieval Napolitano, Rabbi Isaac Arama. Expelled from Spain in 1492, he left a legacy of more than 50 sermons in which he wove together strands of biblical theology, rabbinic tradition, and Aristotelian metaphysics. And in his essay on this week's Parsha, he offers a striking intimation of why the high priest might wear a common stone among the gems and jewels on the Choshen. For Arama, we ought not to look to the implications of the Leshem's name as a means to overshadow its ordinary geology. We ought to embrace the material sight that would face the high priest and offer an explanation for why on his sacred breastplate a common stone sits alongside the sapphires. And for him, the reason is profound. For him, the high priest is not a lone saint, but an ambassador for the nation. He is not a hermit or an eremite or a recluse, but an emissary whose mind ought to be rooted in the needs of all the people. And while there are in every nation the self-sufficient and prosperous, the affluent and confident, there are always those who suffer from misfortune and unease, who see themselves as gravel measured against the jewels of society. So woven into the design of the high priest's robes lies the Leshem, a common rock, alongside rubies and sapphires, to emphasize and remind the wearer as he prays that his mind needs to focus on the dreams of every sector of society, that his soul ought to feel the weight of the troubles faced by both those under the pressures of a public profile and those who suffer in silence and tend to go unseen. Rabbi Arama insinuates that the Leshem stone sits on the high priest's heart on behalf of people in pain, people in need of prayer and protection and support, people beyond the temple grounds who are bereft of attention and left to venture through the world alone. The Leshem sits on his chest to insist that he invests mental energy in the fate of the forlorn. And read this way, the Leshem once more connects back to the Lynx, not in its origin, but its message, where the high priest is taught to sharpen his sight, to mine with his mind the quarry that is the people, and find not only jewels, but souls of every shade, human beings with every species of need. He is asked to see beyond the horizons that sparkle in search of the otherwise unseen. And in many ways, The motto of the Academia di Lance, the Academy of Lynxes, emerges as resonant once more. Minima cura si maxima vi, search small things for the greatest impact. The Leshem stone may not be sourced in mythic power, but it carries a moral force, teaching the high priest that to perform his duty, he needs to see the otherwise unseen. And read this way, we are all summoned to live more attentive lives, opening our eyes to the otherwise overlooked, impressed not only by those who gleam, but those who feel dulled by pain. So may we all join together as an academy of lynxes inspired by the Leshem to deepen the links between us that keep us strong and give us purpose and fill us with hope. I wish you all a Shavua Tov.